Solidarity and Shalom. This evening we are doing a Gaddafi stream. Um, Recently, the anniversary of his murder uh, has happened, and I think it's a good as time as any to honor him by having a live stream here, talking a little bit about him and what he was about and his ideas. Um, he's known as the brotherly leader for a very good reason. Um, he was a revolutionary, an anti-imperialist. Um, he came from a poor Bedouin family. For those who don't know, Bedouin peoples are nomadic peoples of North Africa. They range from Egypt to Morocco all across, and it's a nomadic culture. He came from a tribe, and he wasn't very well off, and like many people who weren't well off, he joined the military. And at the time, Libya was an absolute monarchy. It was one of those monarchies that was, at basically had to do the will of its colonial masters. One of the closest colonial masters, and one that had a deep history, was Italy. And so, as we all know, Libya has great oil reserves and a great supply of oil. And this was, by the 50s and 60s, this after World War II, it made it even before that, but after World War II, it was still such a target for imperialist meddling, um, imperialist meddling, and they had this king Idris, and there was a group of officers within the Libyan kingdom's military, um, and these were revolutionary officers, much like if we were to compare them to other political phenomena, you could compare them to Nasser in Egypt. The officers' movement in Egypt, the officers' coup in Ethiopia, or Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso. It was akin to that, a left-wing officers' coup against an absolute monarchy that was backwards, and Libya was the poorest country in Africa at the time. All of its oil was owned by European and Western foreign companies. And when the officers took over, they nationalized all of these oil reserves. They modernized the economy. They built roads, hospitals, schools, infrastructure, instituted educational systems. Well, we can all hope and pray for his winning in the elections, but I'm not so sure that the warlords that be will allow that to happen. But yes, we hope and pray that his son wins in the election, who's upholding his legacy. And we'll soon find that his legacy will never die. So and this officer's coup happened in 1969. And it was basically a left-wing military junta until 1973, when Gaddafi started implementing, a highly democratizing fashion to the society, one that was very rapid and extreme, like highly, highly direct democratic movements. Libya's GMMR project. But and so during this time, from 1973 to 1977, you could call this like the development period, where um, it was the point where the junta started to slowly uh, transfer the power to the people of Libya. And eventually this culminated in 1977 with a proclamation, by Gaddafi and the Libyan government of the great Libyan Socialist Jamahiriya, which is the guiding ideology of of Libya from 1977 on, and that's when they changed their flag to from the typical Arab Socialist Union flag that was very similar to Egypt's with a different emblem in the middle, and they changed it to the green, just solid green flag. And it was a wholly unique thing. And Gaddafi came out with a book called The Third Political Theory, and it's very interesting. It borrows from Marxism for sure, but it also borrows from Islam. It borrows from Arab socialism. It borrows from Libya's own unique conditions. And Berberism, I think, is something that is underrated because Gaddafi came from that Berber nomadic background. And I think it really does have an effect, did have an effect on how they decided to highly democratize their society. That's right. Long live Jamahiriya. And how Libya decided to do that is through the Jamahiriya councils. So basically, by 1977, Gaddafi had given up all political power. He was like a national figurehead, the guy you sent on diplomatic. He was like a diplomatic guy, a figurehead. But really, the political power had been disseminated throughout Libyan society, and the basis for this political power throughout the entire country were these councils called the Jamahiriya, like these democratic councils called the Libyan Socialist Jamahiriya councils, where every community is run through direct democracy. Something that even the anarchists would, fawn over, I would say. And a lot of this is how, daily functions of Libya would happen. And of course, there was differing levels to the government, regional, and then there's the central government that handled things like foreign policy, military defense, who had control of the major nationalized industries. And it was really, truly, it took Libya from the poorest country in Africa to the richest country in Africa. That's what Muammar Gaddafi and them did. And it wasn't just held in the hands of the elites of Libya. No, all Libyans saw the benefit from becoming the richest country in Africa, from an absolute backward, semi-colonial, absolutist monarchy to the richest country in Africa with a super highly democratic way of doing things, modern infrastructure, modern hospitals, modern schooling. It was modern education, equality for women's rights. Feminism was such a massive part of Gaddafi's Libya. And not only was it massive, he used Islam as a justification as how we should venerate and treat women. And it was beautiful the way he deftly handled the synthesis of tradition and historical progress. He was truly a master of understanding the unique peculiarities of Libya. And he brought it to heights that, well, unless socialist Jamahiriya returns, it will not see anytime soon. Shame on Obama. Because of people like Obama, now Libya has open-air slave markets. It has been in a war for a decade that is only ending now. But the peace is strenuous at best. And the elections, who could say they're fair when one side you have a warlord, the other side you have a Western-backed government, and then you have Gaddafi's son who's also running, and he doesn't have the same luxury of being backed by massive army or the West. So the destruction that imperialism caused to Libya cannot be ignored. And it's a lesson. I mean, he warned us. He said, what happened to Iraq, what happened to Afghanistan can happen to any of you, can happen to any of you next. Could happen. He said it could happen to him. And guess what? It did. Because imperialism doesn't care. Imperialism is... imperialists are paper tigers. Unfortunately, I mean, we have to look at, or fortunately, I should say, we have to look at his foreign policy. And next to Cuba, there were not many states that supported tangibly revolutionary movements across the world during the 20th century more than Libya did. Libya was always providing arms and even troops in many cases to these anti-imperialist and socialist struggles across the world. Right there next with Cuba. I could think of no other countries that did more during that time. And it's just, we see the good and the benefit that Gaddafi did. And then you ask, what is the criticism from the West that made you turn Libya into a decade-long civil war with bloodshed and open-air slave markets and lives being ruined, the richest country in Africa, from the poorest before Gaddafi to the richest during Gaddafi to the poorest again, to one of the poorest at least? What was their reasoning for doing that? He's authoritarian. He held no real political power since 1977. We must always remember the legacy of Muammar Gaddafi. And his idea of the Libyan socialist Jamahiriya and the third political theory, we can still study and learn from today. And it's still being carried on by his son and the loyal followers of it. And I would reckon to say many Libyans dream for a day for that to return. Now, this is just a short live stream. I wanted to do this in honor of Gaddafi, just talk about what he did, what his ideas were, and hopefully, as anti-imperialists, we can help make sure that this never happens again. Now, solidarity and shalom, y'all. Bye-bye.